today's podcast, we talk about the foundations of zone match one high coverage. And joining me to discuss this topic is the head football coach at Lexington High School, Coach Kyle Cogan. Coach, it's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me on, Keith.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, I know you're a repeat performer here, and back in our Deep Dive on Defense series, we did some things with you and got a little bit of your biographical information. So we're going to get right into our topic today, and taking a look at this match principle, this zone match principles that you use. Before we do that, though, you and I were talking a little bit about how you got to this point and what was the evolution for you. So I know you said a lot of this really started with some of those wing T teams in the red and blue set. So those out there who are not familiar with wing T, you have a tight end wing to one side, you have a tight slot opposite of them, and then in a shotgun you'd have the quarterback in the gun and back offset away from the tight end wing. And for you, there were some issues in some of the basic RPOs that were being done at that time, as well as some of the pop passes that kind of caused you guys some problems and led you to some better answers. Talk to us about, I guess, some of those problems and what it led you to.
Yeah, so when I first got to Lexington, our biggest rival was and still obviously his biggest rival was a wing T team that was mainly out of two back sets, like 100, 900 stuff, if people are kind of familiar with Tubby Raymond terminology. And so we only had three vertical threats to worry about. And to me, if I could max fit two back and get, 9+ in the fit, then I'm all about that. So we were a big Virginia Tech robber team because we saw so much two back and split back veer and things like that, where, we didn't necessarily have to worry about a lot of vertical passes or great passing teams. And then when we did get spread stuff, we would play quarter, half, or, quarters on both sides or whatever it might be. We had some, spot drop cover 3 and just pure man cover 1 that we did for blitz, fire zone purposes, but that wasn't really us. And then, like you said, we started running into problems of people doing basic RPOs that were messing with our rules, with one of the big ones being the pop pass to the tight slot, like you were saying, out of red blue off buck sweep, where Will linebacker was really supposed to be the two vertical player. And then we also needed him playing the cutback on trap and one back power and things like that. So we couldn't really play, half to the open side of the red blue formation because it was too much space for the corner to realistically fit, get in the run fit against counter, jet sweep, things like that we were still getting to the open side. And so, we basically had to play sky, which, as a lot of people know, the outside backer and that is not worried about carrying the vertical of number 2. He's a flat player with the corner playing the deep half. So that was the big problem that we ran into against that stuff and playing the, quarters too high robber, style system.
So in looking at that, then, you mentioned you went out and you looked at doing a little bit of the zone match, but for you, in your words, it was kind of half-assed, right? You needed to come up with better answers. Where did you find those answers?
Yeah, so the first kind of year when we made the switch, it was not very good. Looking back, I feel bad for the kids because it wasn't necessarily the best way that we could have done it. It was kind of spot drop. We were trying to match routes. There was still too much gray area. And so I wanted to find a better way. And kind of around that time is when I met one of my best friends now, Dante Barty, who's a GA out at Cal. I think he's done stuff with you guys before
Yep.
too. So a lot of people probably know him. And I flew out and, met him for the first time when he was back in Arizona at Perry High School. And he kind of taught me the pedagogy of how to teach, zone match one high coverage against, various different formations and plays and things like that. I had tried to figure out as much as I possibly can, just reading, saving playbooks from Brophy's website and, James Light website back when it was still public or whatever. But, there was still some things that I couldn't quite figure out on my own that he really helped, me kind of understand and, really teach me like how to teach it, not necessarily, what is the actual scheme, but like proper pedagogy of when to teach things, how to teach things, why do you want to use this and things like that.
I think that's an interesting concept, Coach, the pedagogy of it, right? Because we can all go out there and find the stuff on YouTube, on the internet, the playbooks, etc. But that, I think, is exactly what the secret sauce is: the pedagogy of how to teach this to your players. And you were able to learn that and bring it back to your players. But at the same time, what I love about our game is you need to put a unique twist on it after you learn it. You got to teach it in a way that's going to fit the guys that you have, and that's what you've been able to do as well. Being at a different type of school than you learned it from with Dante, a much smaller school with about 30 guys, 260 in the school. Talk to us a little bit about that evolution for you. You bring it back home and how you put, I guess, your own spin on that.
Yeah, there's a, handful of variations between kind of how we both needed to get it done. We'll still see a fair amount of passing from two back, where we need to, spend time on it. And while, he was at it Perry, they saw it here and there, but they didn't have to worry about it as much. But obviously it was still crucial to the teaching of how the coverage, works and operates. So like, some of the, random kind of different things would be like how we would play like a pro flank, which to me is a tight end and a Z split out. You have different options of how you could play it. And I kind of talk about it in the course that I put out, where you could play it like as Ripla's match rules, where we're going to carry two in the seam. If he's vertical, which we still need to do because we see the pop pass stuff. And then he would play it more like area, where it was a curl flat 2-to-1 drop. You're still matching routes, but you're not necessarily worried about carrying verticals against two back formation. So, there's kind of there's obviously different ways to do it within the system that are still sound. And it's, kind of using, the tools that you need to accomplish the job.
So, Coach, we're going to dig into the principles here a little bit, but I think it's valuable to start with an explanation just on the differences between zone match, spot drop, man match type of coverages.
Yeah. So I kind of talk about this, or I talk about this in the course too. There's 4 total ones, but people really don't get, just pure man mixed up with cover 3 stuff. So that's kind of why we said the 3 main ones. So, spot drop to me is you have a, area on the field that you're worried about getting to. When you see, run pass key, you see pass, you're going to get to that spot and you're going to settle and, vision and break, shrink and expand off quarterback vision. You're not worried about necessarily what the receivers are doing, in the space around you. It's truly, you're looking at the quarterback and you're going to break, when he pulls the pin and, all that stuff. Is it high shoulder, low shoulder, things like that, which there is obviously value into doing that. You're going to get a lot more interceptions that way, just going off the quarterback, but you're not going to get as tight of coverage. So, it's give and take both ways. We don't have near the amount of interceptions that we, used to get, back in the day when we were a lot more spot drop heavy. But I think it's limited the big play ability that offenses have now because we're forcing so much tighter throws. Zone match wise is going to be you're still dropping to an area once you get the pass key. You're still playing with a no cover zone, where you're not going to cover anything in that, line of scrimmage to 5-yard area. We're going to pass off, any kind of like shallow routes and stuff like that. But we're trying to have like big vision and see, the quarterback while also relating to receivers within our area or our zone and, kind of hug up them or match them or, however you kind of explain it to the kids. You're trying to force tighter throws with that head on a swivel of seeing, the receiver while also seeing the quarterback. That's kind of what I mean by like big vision. So there would be kind of a difference between zone match and pure zone. And then I think people kind of get confused on the difference between zone match, man match. To me, it's all about the techniques that you're teaching the underneath guys, because back end wise, there's not necessarily too much of a difference between them. It's mainly with the underneath guys and kind of the rules that they're using. So just, generic ones would be, are you dropping to an area, right? If you're dropping to an area 10 to 12 yards from the line of scrimmage, that's zone, that's not man-to-man, and I know some people say everything turns into man-to-man, at the end of the play. Like, I kind of see what I understand where they're coming from, but really it's the techniques that are being taught up to that point, are going to decide whether it's zone or is it man. So, are you looking at the quarterback? If you're looking at the quarterback, to me, that's zone. If you're not looking at the quarterback and you're trying to play tight coverage, you're looking at the receiver's hip, waiting to punch through hands or, look when he looks like that, that's man to man. That's not zone. Are you passing routes off? More than likely that's going to be zone, right? Especially if you're hovering over the top, 10 to 12 yards. Now, obviously there's man switches or man match, where I have a guy man to man and I'm super tight coverage, or what you'll hear the Saban people say is dick in the hip, which is obviously about as tight of coverage as you could get. And then switching it with, somebody in the hole or a different guy, and then you coming off, that's different than being 10 to 12 yards above the route and, hovering or drifting with the route and switching it off. So that's to me the biggest difference of man match versus zone match and, spot drop zone and things like that.
And I know you cover this a little bit in the spot drop, maybe having the advantage and getting a few more picks. Advantages in playing your type of coverage, the zone match, as compared to a man match coverage.
Yeah. So zone is better versus run than man to man, because you can have eyes in the backfield and you don't necessarily have to worry about fitting the run based off your coverage as much. Obviously there is still, an aspect, if you're trying to match routes, you're going to fit off your coverage in a way, regardless of whether it's zone versus man. But, it is different technique wise of, say it's, imagine like GT counter, guard tackle counter with the fullback going away to block the DN. If I'm playing zone, I can kind of hover, to play the fullback releasing out to the flat while also being in a position to play the cutback, and my eyes are allowing me to somewhat do both, right? As where if I'm playing man to man and it's GT counter and I have the fullback and I'm fitting off the fullback, I'm going to hug him up, and I'm just waiting for him to release out to the flat on play action pass. And if they run the cutback lane, well, hopefully somebody else is there. You know what I'm saying? So there can be pros and cons to both, right? But to me, zone in general is better against stopping the run than man is.
And I know as you look at this and start to break it down, one of the main principles you're going to work off is the dividers. So talk to us about the dividers in your zone principles.
Yeah. So dividers are they're imaginary lines that run down the field. And basically it's a rule for the kids to know how they line up leverage wise based on their rule of, are they lining up on one, or are they lining up on two, things like that. But mainly leverage wise, if am I inside leverage or outside leverage, because I want to use my help best as possible. And cover three, cover one, your help is going to be that middle of the field safety. So ideally, I want to get help from him on any kind of pass plays, whether or kind of the hook defenders as well, which is usually going to be the inside linebackers. If they're running a slant or a dig or a post or, some sort of like inside breaking route, I want a guy outside of the route and inside of the route. I don't want both the outside backer or the curl flat defender, because I guess technically it could be anybody. I don't want the curl flat defender and the hook defender both inside of the slot receiver when he's running post, because after that play, they're going to realize, well, we should just run corners the whole game, or we should just run a deep out instead. It's not going to be beneficial to us to play, with two guys inside. Now, obviously, if we get like crazy weird splits, like, yes, that's going to happen. But to me, coverage is all about where is your help, and then how do we want to align based off that help. The rules that we use are a 5-1 bottom, which I think that I got that from Bill Williams out in California, if I remember right. So the 5 is if the ball's on the far hash or you're to the field, just same thing, different way to say it. 5 yards on top of the numbers, which is high school wise is basically like a apex midpoint between the top of the numbers and the hash. And that's just, there's your imaginary line. Is your guy inside or outside of that imaginary line? If he's inside, I'm going to line up outside. If he's outside, I'm going to line up inside. If the ball's in the middle of the field, it's 1 yard on top of the numbers, and same idea. Is the inside or outside the divider? I'm going to line up opposite of that. And then the last one would be if the ball's on the near hash, then the divider is the bottom of the numbers. And again, it's same idea, imaginary line running down the field. Am I going to get help from the middle of the field safety or not? So we'll use that for alignment purposes, and then playing actual, routes and concepts once the ball snapped. So from there, it's getting into, okay, they snap the ball and he's running a post, he's running a dig, whatever inside breaking route. I more than likely am going to get help from the hook defender or the middle of the field safety. How do I want to play leverage wise compared to the help that I'm getting inside? So this is getting into what I talk about. It's called position maintenance, which is just your position relative to the receiver in relation to the divider. And basically all that means is if they're running a route inside the divider, I want to play outside leverage and in the trail, or underneath, behind them, however you explain it to the kids, where you're in a position to undercut the route and try to get a pick because you have help over the top. If they're running a route outside the divider, so a wheel or I don't know, a deep out or whatever it might be, then I want to be, or a vertical, a straight go. I want to be inside and on top. So like basketball, I want to be between them and the ball. I want to be on top of the route or in front of him. However you explain it to the kids, deeper than him, because you want to cut the route off so you don't get beat deep vertically, right? If you're behind him and he can outrun you, then that's not going to be good. So that's where all the divider stuff comes into play, is alignment wise, and then playing different route concepts and, specific routes and stuff that we're going to get, trying to use our help best as possible.
So I want to get a little bit more into some of the general rules of the position, but I want to stop right there. And just in terms of how people attack this, right? Do you see still the typical things that you're going to see against, one high zone coverage that's spot dropping, or do you feel like people try to do things a little bit differently, maybe as they get used to you, and you see the same opponents every year and stuff, running more of the zone match?
So I probably the guys that we play in conference, that have been there, aren't new, from the last 3 years or so. I'm sure they've noticed, that we do things a little bit differently than we did before. So we don't necessarily get as many teams trying to just throw straight 4 verticals like we did when it was spot drop zone. Because, I'm sure, they're coaching too. They're going to see us carrying the verticals now. So they're probably, they're thinking, oh, that's not going to work, because it'll play out in a way like man free at times. Although, again, technically the techniques and stuff taught between man free and, the Rip Liz stuff are not the same for the kids. So, we won't see as many of the, traditional spot drop, cover 3 beaters, but I mean, there's still ones that work against both, like curl flat, like horizontal stretch concepts on the curl flat defender, double hitches, things like that. Like, we're not going to stop that regardless of whether it's spot drop or zone match. They put a guy in the curl, they put a guy in the flat. We have one guy playing the curl and the flat. Well, he can't defend both. So, some things we still see and some things we don't see as much.
Do you feel it covers up the seams and 4 verts a little bit better? I know that's certainly a common weapon against a 1 high zone defense.
Yeah, no doubt. It's helped us against the pop pass stuff that we were seeing. Obviously if they throw a perfect pass, then there's not much that you could do about it. But yeah, it's definitely has helped against that stuff.
I'm sure, again, it's tightening down that window, right? If you have the traditional spot drop teams, I mean, at some point that quarterback's going to, feel really good about the windows that he's opening up with, with his eyes. But, as you get into some of your principles, you're able to take that away a little bit better. And that kind of leads us to our next section here, just the general rules of the position as you teach the 1 high zone match principles.
Yeah, you kind of reminded me of another reason we had to switch too, was like that last year where we kind of half-ass zone matched. We played, I think it was 3 kids that went to go play FCS quarterback, or they played quarterback and then they played FCS football. So even at our small school level, like there was a run there for a little bit where we were seeing some dudes for our level that if we were just going to let them throw it and catch it, like it was going to happen. So if we weren't trying to force, difficult throws, in tight windows, like we weren't going to have a chance to beat some of those teams. So that was kind of another reason that we ended up making the switch. You kind of reminded me of that. But getting into the rules of the droppers. So our hook defenders, which, usually are going to be the inside linebackers, and this is regardless of whether they're the strong side or the weak side. The general rule that we tell them, and this is stuff that we need like freshmen and sophomores to understand, is you're going to drop to your hook, 10 to 12 yards, you're going to settle up, and you're going to relate to whoever the final three is after the pattern distribution. So after, it's all said and done and the smoke's settled, who ends up being number three, that's who you're going to end up relating to. And that could be, say everybody goes vertical and it's check release from the back, that could be three. Or a back goes out and, the tight end comes in, then that's going to end up being three, or, whoever it might be. We count outside in. I'm sure that's how everybody that I know does it for, route distribution, but that's the hook player's general rule. The curl flat guys, for them, we say their rule is two in the seam. And for us, the seam isn't necessarily as much area or location on the field. It's more of a route concept. Is for us, a seam is somebody in the slot running a vertical or running like a 9 route, a go route, or whatever. We call that a seam. I assume a lot of people do as well. So for them, is the number two running, a seam release type route, yes or no? If he is, yes, he is, that's our guy. That's who we want to relate to. If no, he is not doing that, then we're going to play our curl flat drop, and we're going to relate 2 to 1. And then our outside third players, for us, we say mod on one, which stands for man on deep for mod. If he's deep, I got him. If he's not deep, then I'm going to look to number two, more than likely, for, whoever is the next deep or vertical threat. And then our middle of the field player, he really is the only true zone defender that we have, where he's not trying to relate to routes. He'll be 14, 15 yards deep when they snap the ball. He's pedaling back to 20 plus, deeper than the deepest. Don't let anybody get behind you. You should be top down on everything. Just, same thing, different way how to explain it to the kid. We're looking at the quarterback, and he's, vision and break off him. We say melt to the first look, break on the second. And by melt, I mean angle pedal, because obviously you don't want to open your hips too early. Like Dante says, then you're opening your hips to the pot of gold. He's a DB guy, so he's got, funny phrases for stuff like that. But that's, how we teach the middle of the field guy. He's really the only true, zone dropper, purely off the quarterback guy that we have.
So, looking at all those drops, right? And you can use a number of different rotations with this, I'm sure. But for you, a lot of this is going to be based on flow. And, I was talking to you before we got going, I'm seeing quite a few, I guess, modern playbooks, you would call it. You start with 2x2, right? And you see the defenses lined up against that and assignments rolling off of that and then adjusting from there. And, that's kind of a change because not, I guess, extremely long ago, everything was going to be based off of two back. And for you, it's still that kind of teaching that you feel teaching out of the two back flow, even if you don't see it, really helps your guys understand this and have all the answers they need versus the various sets.
Yep. So even if we didn't see as much two back as we do, I would still teach all the two back flow rules and everything, because to me, it just helps the kids understand how everything fits together, and they kind of understand, the puzzle and see the whole picture and stuff. Um, so there's 4 different flows that we teach the kids. Um, and everybody, back end wise has a backfield key, besides the D line. So the 4 flows that we teach is no flow, where neither of the backs go out into the routes, unless it's, super late, like a check release type thing, or they both block. Strong flow is going to be both backs going out to the passing strength. Weak flow is going to be both backs going out to away from the passing strength. And split flow is, one goes strong, one goes weak. We'll game plan. I have people ask me this of we've game planned how to play. One goes out strong and the other one blocks. Well, is that split flow or is that strong flow? For us, like when stuff like that happens, like camp rules, we say that's strong flow. Or if, one goes out weak and the other one blocks, we say that's weak flow. Could you do it different ways? Yes. And depending upon what you need to get done, maybe that's a game plan adjustment you need to make, where, you treat that like split flow instead. So, but that's just general camp rules for us. And then the last thing that we teach off of that is, those are the 4 flows, and then we could get boot action off any of the flows. So, play action pass, quarterback, boots out of the pocket, rolls out of the pocket, bootleg, whatever people say. We call that boot action, that we could get off any of the different flows.
So I think that's an important one. You see more and more teams right now getting back into some of those traditional sets, running more of the play action, right? It's just helpful for the quarterback to move that launch point. The play action obviously starts to split the defense. So, how well do you think this style of defense, how well does it fit being able to defend those types of things?
It has definitely helped us. So that was, waggle has always been a play, since the beginning of time that has hurt defenses. And back when we were playing, heavy robber stuff, we had problems, with the robber safety coming down on the drag and then playing quarterbacks that were good enough to throw the backside post on our half defender. That it was, he had the arm to do it, and their kid was better than our kid, and they won the one-on-one. So that was, a problem that we ran into against really good teams, late in the year. Playing the one high model of it, of how we do it, we can get help on that deep throw shot on the post, and then the drag is on the linebacker when he gets that play action read. Obviously the back out is still on the curl flat defender, which would play out the same either way, but it has helped us drastically on defending boot flood concepts and things like that.
So Kyle, when you look at and watch, whether it's a Friday, a Saturday, or Sunday, you start to see the parity today anyway, right? Because there's so much that's just available online that coaches, I guess, idea of things filtering down from a level can happen as quickly as, a week, right? That stuff is so much more available today. Are there any concepts that you've been seeing here over the course of the 2020 season, although it's been abbreviated for a lot of people? Any kind of those concepts that you feel you're not too worried about, you're well suited, or I guess in the other regard, maybe some things that you're looking at, how you might adjust and stay ahead of those guys, keep the chalk last?
let's see. I was very blessed to have two all-conference corners for the last couple of years, so we were able to win. I mean, it wasn't a one-on-one ball. It was not a 50-50 ball. Our kid was going to win. So we've been. That's a big thing with playing one high is. Once they get outside the divider on the 9 or the wheel or whatever it is, if you can't win the 1-on-1 50 ball, then you're going to have problems. And we're graduating one of those kids this year. So, we might have to, use more 2-high concepts and passing situations that we haven't had to do the last couple of years. It's been really good for us against play action, like I said, and different flood concepts, whether that's NCAA, which to me is drive, dig, post, or shallow dig, post, 3-level flood, a go, deep out, a flat, or like inverted flood stuff where it's flat, a seam, and a dig, the different variations that you could get. It's been really good to us for all that stuff. We haven't had anybody hurt us too bad throwing the ball, but having good players definitely helps with that.
Always solve some problems. In looking at things, we've seen a lot of the move to teams, again, they're trying to stay ahead. So we went through the whole, not that we're out of it, because I still think RPOs are very much alive and being utilized in all kinds of different ways. But off of that, more people starting to play man coverage. And so all the shallows and mesh and the variations of those really have come to the forefront. It seems like they're in everybody's playbook at every level. And then off of that too, which I think is really useful to me at the high school level, if you have a young quarterback, creating the shallow screens, right? Those have a ton of value, and any concerns with those types of things, I think those could be devastating if they're coached up the right way.
Yeah. So things like mesh and stuff like that, having, kind of the one high match or Rip Liz match has helped us have a counter to things like that when we do play man free against different spread sets. But yeah, the shallow screen is a tough one, or like the tunnel screen, to the number one, because we're getting so much depth in our drop where they're completing it underneath us, and obviously the whole really basic idea of zone is keep everything in front of you.
Yeah, they're throwing it in the no cover for sure. They have to.
Yeah, they're throwing it in the no cover, which, okay, mission accomplished. And then they have 3 guys coming out to block all your zone defenders.
Right.
And if you ain't blocks, then that's a problem. Which we have had issues with that. Good tunnel teams are a pain. To me, if you're not getting the D line involved on that, then it's going to be a rough day.
How do you coach that up for you? I mean, we can all start drawing up different schemes and scheming things up, but the best stuff, you're going to work on the read and reaction. You're going to work on, if you are getting those shallow screens as an example, being able to defeat those blocks and be able to get off of them quickly, and not turn those into big gains. So for you, going back to what you talked about before, the pedagogy of teaching this, what are you going to go to as far as, okay, we're going to have to teach some of these things better?
Yeah. If we're staying in the, zone match 1 world, and we're not, going to play cover 2 or, obvious answers to those coverage beaters. So general way that we're going to play it is whoever the outside third defender is, they're playing any sort of double move. So any kind of, bubble and go or key and go, tunnel and go, that's on them. The flat defender is going to be the force defender, whether that's a run or, really a screen pass against a block. He's going to be the one that's, turning it back in, so we could, leverage the ball. Obviously things like tunnel and kind of key screens are going to go back inside anyways. We usually see it out of trips. And so we'll usually have either the free safety dropping down in between 2 and 3, or the linebacker. That's if it's a weak side rotation, then we'll bump the linebacker out to be that, curl defender, where he's going to be inside of the force defender and the lead through block on the screen, with whoever the next guy is inside of that lead blocker. So, it's still about gap integrity, even against screens when they're getting all the blockers out of, if they have 3 blockers, ideally you want 4 guys for the 4, holes or gaps that the running back could go through, or if there's 2 blockers, then you want 3 guys. Obviously that's perfect world. I mean, at a point it's going to come down to, you got to get off blocks, and make the tackle for minimal gain. And the D line have to, have great screen recognition, and that has to be worked all week and really throughout the season. If you see it a lot of, if they're not turning around as soon as they realize, wow, this was way too easy and I'm not JJ Watt, them turning around and pursuing to the ball, taking a proper angle, getting there, to, run them down from behind, that solves a lot of problems, is the D-line screen recognition. But, you've done high school ball before, how high school kids can be.
Sure. With that in mind, I think it's all about having a plan to teach those things. Anything that you do, or ideas for drills to start to train some of those things you mentioned into your players?
We started working screens and like pursuit drills and stuff like that, where I'm sure if you got on YouTube, then everybody could basically see that, of lining up like normal pursuit drill and drop back and throw to a coach standing out on the perimeter and things like that. And then just working it in team, and even throwing in screens during like inside run periods and things like that, where to keep the kids honest so they're not cheating the system.
Right. Well, Coach, you've put all this together, and what's really going to do justice for those guys out there who want to learn more about this is to be able to dig into your course and your courses. I think you have 3 really good ones now on CoachTube. Talk to us a little bit about this one that we focused on today, the foundations of zone match principles.
Yeah. So obviously I talk about, the stuff that, we did in the pod so far, and try to go more in depth with pictures and videos and things like that, of each of like the principles and whatnot. Getting into, how do the rules slightly change, when both backs go strong or they both go weak, what happens when they split, things like that. The difference between when would we want to flood the coverage and when would we not want to flood the coverage and, stay in our, generic taught zones and whatnot. That's the new one that I just put out of 2-back. And then at the end, I kind of talk about applying that to different, spread set formations, 2x2, 3x1, 3x2, 4x1, which is I have courses on that. as well on CoachTube. And then the third one is about run fits using the same coverage, because to me, everything needs to be taught back to front. I know a lot of guys, and obviously there's different ways to do it, but to me, when I think about how do I want to fit the run, I think about what coverage do I want to use. And then from there, that's going to dictate to me how many guys I can get in the fit, especially if I'm playing some sort of RPO or option team. That it's going to be crucial to, match the numbers and, who has pitch, who has dive, who has quarterback, things like that. And then I'm thinking about, okay, what front do I want to use against, the surfaces that I'm getting? And by that, I mean, guard tackle, tight end, tight end wing. Is it tackle over? Is it a dead formation with X over? Where people are covered up and things like that, or the tight ends covered up, or whatever it might be, is the third course where I talk about run fits.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate you taking time, and I know we didn't necessarily get into every detail here, but you certainly shared quite a bit here. I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll be sure for our listeners, you can find the links to Coach's courses in the show notes. So, Coach, again, thanks for the time, and I look forward to having you visit with us again and talking more defense.
For sure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com, and follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.